When investigators finally broke into the Countess's private chambers, they found the book. A ledger not of debts or household expenses, but of death. By the final page, the Count had reached 650. This wasn't a work of fiction. This was the secret record of Countess Elizabeth Báthory, a woman of immense wealth and power in 16th century Hungary. To the world, she was a refined, intelligent noblewoman. But within the stone walls of her castles, she was a monster. One who believed the secret to eternal youth was written in the blood of virgins. Welcome, seeker, to the Obscuria Vault. Today, we unseal one of history's most terrifying and controversial files, the case of the Blood Countess. The story you've heard is of a vampiric noblewoman who bathed in blood, but the truth, pieced together from hundreds of witness testimonies and the grim physical evidence found at her castle, is far more depraved. Elizabeth Báthory wasn't just a product of her time. She was the product of a family legendary for its power, its ambition, and its madness. The Báthory clan was infamous for its inbreeding and eccentricity. One uncle was a reputed Satanist, an aunt was a known poisoner, and her own brother was notoriously debauched. Elizabeth was raised in a world where power meant you were above God and above the law. She was given a first-rate education, speaking multiple languages, but she was also given lessons in cruelty from a young age, witnessing the casual torture of servants as a part of daily life. This was the gilded cage that forged a monster. At 15, she was married to a man as fearsome as her own family, Count Ferenc Nádasdy, known across Hungary as the Black Knight. He was a brutal and effective soldier, often away fighting the Ottoman Turks. In his absence, Elizabeth was the absolute ruler of their vast estates, including the infamous Čachtice castle. It was during these long absences that the whispers began. Servant girls in her employ started to vanish. At first, it was explained away. The girls ran off. They were dismissed. They died of common illnesses, but the disappearances became more frequent, and the stories from those who escaped grew more horrifying. They spoke of a mistress with a volcanic temper who would punish the smallest mistake, a misplaced pin, a poorly stitched collar, with a fury that was inhuman. After the Black Knight died in 1604, all restraint disappeared. Now a widow of immense wealth and autonomy, Elizabeth's private cruelties allegedly escalated into a systematic campaign of torture and murder. She was no longer just punishing servants, she was harvesting them, and she had help. Her inner circle was a cabal of evil: her old nurse, Ilona J.E.U., her brutish manservant, Vicky, and a local witch named Dorocha Sentitz, who was said to have taught the Countess darker, more esoteric forms of cruelty. Together, they transformed Čachtice Castle into a private abattoir. The methods of torture, described in excruciating detail by over 300 witnesses, were a catalogue of human depravity. Girls were beaten with heavy clubs and whips until their flesh was shredded from their bones. Needles were driven under their fingernails. In the brutal Hungarian winters, they were stripped naked, forced outside, and doused with water until they froze into living ice sculptures. But Elizabeth's preferred method was fire. She would heat pokers and tongs in the fireplace and press them against the girls' skin. She was said to have bitten chunks of flesh from their faces and arms in fits of rage. Witnesses claimed she took a perverse, almost sexual, pleasure in their suffering. This is where her story enters the realm of legend. The most famous tale claims that after striking a servant girl so hard that the girl's blood splashed onto her hand, Elizabeth believed her skin looked younger, more radiant. From this, the obsession was born, bathing in the blood of young virgins to preserve her own fading beauty. While there is no direct witness testimony to full bloodbaths, she believed she had the right to consume the lives of those she considered beneath her, literally and figuratively. For years, Elizabeth pried exclusively on the local peasant girls. No one cared. They were disposable. Their parents were too poor and too terrified to complain. But as her paranoia and bloodlust grew, Elizabeth made a fatal mistake. She grew bored. She began luring the daughters of the lesser nobility to her castle under the pretense of teaching them courtly etiquette. When these high-born girls began to disappear, the authorities could no longer ignore the rumors. The official investigation began in 1610, led by György Thurza, the Palatine of Hungary, the highest official in the land after the king. Thurza was a methodical man. He collected hundreds of sworn depositions from villagers, former servants, and even the families of noble victims. The testimonies painted a consistent, terrifying picture. The breaking point came on December 29, 1610. Acting on the testimony of an escaped victim, Thurza led a surprise raid on Čachtice castle. What he found there was a scene from hell. According to his own letters, his men discovered one girl dead and drained of blood, another dying from torture, and others imprisoned in the dungeons, awaiting their turn. The physical evidence was undeniable. The castle was a charnel house. With such overwhelming evidence, a swift trial and execution should have followed. And it did, but not for Elizabeth. Her accomplices, the nurse Ilona Jehu and the witch Dorothea Sentis, had their fingers torn off with hot pincers before being burned at the stake. Fikirka was beheaded, his body burned on the same pyre. They were tortured until they confessed every last horrific detail. But Elizabeth Báthory, the architect of it all, was never put on trial. Why? Because she was a noblewoman of the highest rank. A public trial would have been a catastrophic scandal for the aristocracy. Her family, one of the most powerful in the region, lobbied King Matthias II to avoid the disgrace. So, a dark compromise was reached. Justice would be done, but it would be done in secret. Her punishment was as unique as her crimes. She was sentenced to be imprisoned within her own castle. On Thurza's orders, masons arrived at Čachtice and began to wall up the windows and doors to the Countess's bedchamber, entombing her inside the very rooms where she had committed her atrocities. They left only a small slot for food and water. The Blood Countess was left to rot in a stone tomb of her own making. Elizabeth Báthory lived for 4 more years in her solitary prison. She was found dead on the floor by a guard in August of 1614. Her story was immediately suppressed. It was too shameful, too monstrous. It was an inconvenience for the powerful families connected to her. For centuries, she became a local ghost story, a dark legend whispered by Hungarian peasants. But was it all true? Some modern historians argue the case against Báthory was a political conspiracy, a way for her enemies and relatives, including Thurza, to seize her vast lands and wealth. They point to the lack of her personal diaries, only the alleged copies, the sheer volume of evidence, over 300 witness statements. While the legend of bathing in blood may be an embellishment, the core reality of a sadistic, powerful noblewoman torturing and killing girls for years with impunity seems terrifyingly plausible. Whether she was a misunderstood victim of political greed or history's most prolific female serial killer, her file remains one of the most disturbing in the vault. It is a chilling testament to a time when noble blood could wash away any sin, and a chilling reminder that the most terrifying monsters are not creatures of fantasy, but human beings given absolute power. The file on the Blood Countess is now sealed. The secrets of the past are never truly buried. They are merely waiting for a seeker to find them. To be notified of our next acquisition, subscribe to the Obscuria Vault and activate your notifications. Until next time, remember that the most beautiful castles often hide the darkest dungeons.